Bump the show up just a little bit live, but for those who watch this at a later time, no problem. John and I are excited to be here today, and as always, a quick introduction. I'm Shannon Gray. This is my co-host,
I'm John Cummings. Good morning.
and we are going to be talking to you today about show off talking about mayoral races and how they're typically nonpartisan. And that just simply means that you don't have a primary where someone runs for the Republican ticket and then someone else runs for a Democratic ticket and then they run in a general election. With a race for mayor, it's not aligned to any particular party. And so therefore the various candidates don't have to say, I'm Republican, I'm Democrat, whatever, and they run. What are your thoughts about that, in essence, being the way people run for mayor? I mean, that it was more of a tell the people what your political viewpoints are before you run for, the person that's going to control the city. What are your thoughts, John?
Yeah, it's an interesting concept because obviously where I came from in New York, it's there's nothing more political than the mayor's role. I mean, it's
Right.
primaries, it's lots of times those primaries are nastier than the general election, just because the nature of the beast up there is so heavily Democrat. Those Democrat primaries are nasty. So I understood it that way. This way, if you think about it, especially in a smaller town, which Conway is
Yeah.
compared to New York,
Mm.
I understand. I understand you want to keep the politics out of it as much as you can, and I do get that because you want to work with everybody. But I guess sometimes it's unavoidable. I mean, it's always going to bleed through. There's no doubt because you have a certain group of core beliefs, and they're going to go one way or the other. So I think people know which way you lean, and they will know which way you lean by any of the public events that you have or debates or whatever you do. I think people will know. But I don't think it's disruptive. In some ways, I think at that level, and I think it's important that you only stay at that level, that the turnout could actually be greater at a local election than in a bigger election. That people might get more interested by saying, "Hey, you know what? These people, they're not really affiliated, so we can jump in, and you won't feel, oh, I'm supporting a Democrat, oh, I'm supporting Republican, or I'll only vote Republican." You can figure it out, but if it kind of keeps the party out of it, like I said, in a local election, I don't think there's a problem with it at all.
Yeah. Um, and both Ken and the current mayor Bellamy are from Conway. They're local, and in fact, I think they both went to Conway High School. Now, I know Ken did. I can't 100% assure you that Mayor Bellamy did, but I'm pretty confident she did. And it's also, if you know anything about them, Ken Richardson was the chairman, and two, he ran for Congress this last time against Tom Rice, and so he's a Republican, and Mayor Bellamy is a Democrat, and that's not terribly difficult to discern. Kind of as you noted, you sort of figure out what they do, what party they would align with, and I think her decision support the gay pride movement with that big um, what did she did some sort of announcement of we're a pride city or some craziness like that, and then she alleged that the city council had signed off on it, and then it turned out that was not exactly the case. There was some pushback from community folks, and not for nothing, when you have uh, a group of people, whether it's 10, 15, or 20 people that show up in a small town like Conway to protest, that's not to be ignored. Now, you might think, well, that's not a lot of people. Someone who had gathered people together to protest, for example, Trump's arrest and things like that, it is difficult to get people to come out. And so when we had, back when the FBI was really who we were protesting because of the nonsense, when they did the raid on Mar-a-Lago, I think we might have had. Did you come to that by any chance? We had it
No.
in downtown Myrtle Beach. I'm going to say there were about 15 or 20 of us for that. So now that's a national thing, and this again, I think we can both agree this is Trump country. So the fact that we could only get 15 or 20 people to come out to a national type event speaks volumes to the fact that they got 15 or 20 or 30 people to show up to protest what the mayor did. So that's that the percentage of people from Conway who were upset with her is much larger. And so I think that's going to cost her the election, to be totally fair with you. A very well-known guy. You're not going to have people in the Conway area, certainly not natives, who don't know who Ken Richardson, who he is. And I think they like what he stands for. So I fully expect that he is going to run away with this. I don't know what your take is on that. I'm not saying that Mayor Bellamy is like, don't read into that. I've met her a couple of times. She's very nice. But I just think that you make decisions like that and that it upsets the people. And then she sort of thumbed her nose at him like, well, we're not changing it.
Yeah.
And it just is another aside, when she ignored him. When Pete Buttigieg came down and came through Conway when they were both running for president, she gave Pete Buttigieg the key to the city. Very different treatment.
Yeah, so much for not revealing which party affiliation you have. In the spirit of full disclosure, I don't know Mayor Bellamy, and I do know Ken Richardson. And his story is a great story. I think everybody knows it. Local guy, sold peanuts off his bicycle, went to the high school, played football. He's a Conway guy.
Yeah.
And but what I think is most impressive is his business background. I mean,
Yes.
he came from nothing and has something, and that's always admirable. And if he could use that business acumen to help the city of Conway, I think it would be a great thing. One thing that really surprised me when I first started coming down here, which is about 8 years ago, when we first started looking around to see if we wanted to, relocate here, I was really unaware of Conway and the history of Conway. And to me, it could be, and it is partially, but could be more of a gem than it is. It just has that feel to it. They've redone a lot of towns around the country that were predominantly like railroad towns and industrial towns that had a real hub, and the old architecture, they preserved it, and it's got that homey feel. And I think that the right person could really sell that to the Myrtle Beach area at large. So when people come here and go, yeah, we want to go to the beach, we get that. But there are other alternatives, to the beach, and, going around and having a vibrant downtown, how vibrant that it is would be great. I'm sure you would agree with that too. It's good for business. But
absolutely.
I think that's the key. I think it's a town that really is could be a real gem if they market it right.
Yeah, I went to Coastal Carolina. That's where I played softball there, and I have to be fully honest with you. I mean, Conway is where the college is located, but it wasn't a place that I ever found myself in terms of, going downtown. I don't think I ever one time in the year went to downtown Conway. It does nothing in my recollection. And I was commenting because for those of you who don't know, I own a small business down there, a little sporting goods store called Sports Free Play, right on 3rd Avenue. And to my left, there's a law office, and then to my right, there's a law office, and then Town Beast on the right, and then to the left, there's Crafty Rooster, then Pickle Cucumber. So your choices are you either have a restaurant / pub, or you have a law office. Pretty much you have down there. And then I noticed that the guy that owns Crafty Rooster, there's 2 of them, and he is an urban bar. And then if you walk just a little bit further down on the right there, you cross over, you get the new restaurant that opened up, Poppin' Witch, which is kind of like a pub sort of place too. And then you go to the next place, and it's a whiskey bar. And now just around the corner at a place I actually had, we're relocating my store, putting in a tapestry, not tapestry, but a tap. We can come in and pick your own beer or whatever.
Right.
And so
yeah,
I thought, I said, it's gonna. Yeah. So I said, how in the world are they gonna make it with this many breweries and things there? And one of the college kids. And I thought, well, they better do something to get the college kids here, because I'm just telling you, when I was in college at Coastal, we went to Myrtle Beach. That's where we went. That was the place to be. So I do hope that's true. I can tell you that again, it's hard for me to say it's changed. I went there. I just didn't go, so I couldn't tell you really what it was like.
Right.
But I know that having gone to other small towns, the work that they're doing to kind of beautify the downtown area is pretty noticeable. I mean, it really does look good. We have some more work to do on the parking, and I'm hoping that's something that Mr. Richardson will be able to deal with, because I do think he's a problem solver, and I think that he listens to the people, and that we'll get some real change, positive change that he can bring to the city. So that'll be, and that race is coming up in this November. So a lot of time between now and the election. So
Yeah, and I think it's important to have someone in place that if there's going to be development, and obviously there is, the Horry County development just can't be Myrtle Beach and Surfside and Myrtle's Inlet, and it just can't be that. It's got to bleed out towards Conway, and it will. I think one of the things that they need to keep an eye on, or they need to focus on, is if you're going to do construction near downtown, they should make it similar to the architecture that they have.
yep.
Do the townhouse style buildings. There's even some down by the Marsh Walk, believe it or not. There is new housing that they built down there that are townhouses. And you look at it and you're like, what is that doing there? But when you think about the practicality of it, it's great. But it's something that would match the architecture downtown. And I think that would be very, very important if you're trying to sell that idea, like this is an older town and here we are and we're still here and the architecture is great and there's a lot of fun to be had here. Two, they also have to get more involved with the college, as you said. I think one of the things that they could do, and I'm sure that they've thought about this, is they need to put up like these boutique hotels, like small hotels that parents, when they come in parents weekend and stuff, they need them in Conway, closer to downtown, but so you can still get to the campus.
Yes.
Maybe parents weekend run that shuttle back and forth. Get one of those trolley type buses, run it back and forth, like similar to the one you said with the parking. If they had built a parking lot a little further away, get on the shuttle, drive around town. You could run one over to the school. Wouldn't be a bad thing. But those boutique hotels, they don't really mess with the flavor of the town. You don't go up too far. Small place, put a nice restaurant in it. But this is another one of those. And then there are also other things to do. Walk around downtown. So they need to connect. You're right. They need to connect a little bit more with the university. And I think that would be important. But any expansion, I've noticed that when you start mixing architecture like that, it turns people off.
Yeah.
People like that feeling, or they don't.
Yep.
They like that tradition, bricks, actual brick frontage and everything. I think that would be a
Instead
couple
of big
things
metal boxes.
Yeah, I think that's something they could concentrate on, and I think that type of thing would work, especially in an area that's expanding the way that Horry County is.
It's funny you should say that. There is, as you would expect, there are businesses that come and go, as is the routine. Because some folks open up a business and they expect it to be profitable. And I'm just going to tell you, opened up our sporting goods store, we understood that it would be a year to 18 months, maybe even 2 years before we saw a profit. That's just because of how much you put in on the front end. It takes a while. If you put in, say, $75,000 on the front end, and then you make $75,000 your first year, that's good, but quite frequently you don't break even. But anyway, I did notice that there was one, I think there had been a fire, and I believe it's on Laurel Street. And so there's like, you'll see the buildings and all of a sudden there's a big gap, and they've obviously bulldozed and taken down everything. It would be an ideal location, but just what you're talking about, little boutique hotel, build one in there. It's nice, but it needs to, I agree with you 100%. It needs to blend in and look like it's always been there, and that it's not some new thing. And then, put some kind of a little, restaurant down on the bottom of it that folks can stop in
and and the more you connect the downtown with the school, the better it is for everybody. Even we were in that. I've been to the Peanut Warehouse for a couple of events. That's such a great, unique facility, and if you get the kids connected from the university with that, then guess what? Anybody who meets their intended wife or husband, maybe that's where they want to get married, over in the Peanut Warehouse. There has to be that connection. I know that I worked up at Fairfield University in Connecticut, and obviously you're at college. A lot of people meet there and their future spouses. and everybody comes back, no matter where in the country they're from. They come back to the campus to get married.
Yeah.
So you kind of want that connection, and I think
Yes.
anything that they can do to basically expand the footprint of the town and the university together would be a positive. And I think that I'm sure that a guy like Ken knows that.
Yeah.
And like I
I
said, I
think
don't know.
a
It's not
great
an
name for
endorsement. I
that
don't know
hotel.
Bellamy, but
Yeah.
yeah,
A
I
great
think
name for the
that
hotel will be the
yeah,
and that's,
anything like that. Yeah,
yeah. And maybe even have a little place
that's the way
designated
to
in
go.
downtown where folks could get married.
Yeah, anything like that is a good idea. And like I said, the first thing I noticed when I got here was Conway. Like,
Yeah.
wow, look at this town. And there's towns like that all over the country, and a lot of them, at least up until this recent economy, were enjoying a big revival. People like that sort of thing. They like to stay in a town where they can park and then walk around and shop and eat, and especially college towns. There's a lot of college towns that are like that. That they always revolved around the college. And if you could expand that a little bit more, tighten up the relationship between the two, I think it'd be great.
Well, a couple of things that I will credit Mayor Bellamy with is they've gotten the scooters that they have down there. I'm assuming that was a city council thing where you can rent them for not much of anything, the electric scooters, and zip around town, because parking can be a problem because there's not a lot of, if Ken is elected, that he will be able to address that. But many of the people that have come into my store who have, they're there because their kid is looking at Conway or Coastal rather, and they're either they're going or they're considering attending. They've all said, "Wow, this is a great little town. I love it. It's beautiful." So it is a draw if people know about it. And then I had a couple from Canada, snowbirds. They were here and they had asked me, "Hey, where's this tree? It's 600 years old and da 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 da." And I said, "I'm not really sure. Let me look it up." And like in May, it fell over, so it's no
Yeah.
more. Great. I mean, if you've been to Charleston, that's kind of what Conway reminds me of a little bit. If you've ever been to the historical area down in Charleston, it's beautiful. The big trees and the houses with the decks and the Widow's Peak, and then you've got the trees with the moss hanging off. It makes me think back to my grassroots. And so I feel like that is something that they can certainly play up from Conway. So I think you're right on that's something that would attract more people.
And the parking, obviously, as you mentioned, and we've talked about this before on the show, is key. I can give you an example. There's a Little Italy section up in the Bronx of New York City called Arthur Avenue, and it's very famous. And I guess it's about 35 years ago, they were struggling. They were really struggling because you just could not park. It had less parking than Conway does because the streets are really narrow, and they had alternate side of the street. If you're not familiar with that, you have to move your car every other
Right.
day so they can clean the streets. They were going under, and
Yeah.
all they did was they tore down a couple of dilapidated buildings, and they put in about 25, 30 spots, municipal spots, meter parking, but long time. Like you get 6-hour meter. If you wanted
Right.
to spend a day there, you could. Completely saved it, completely turned it around. And now it's still vibrant. And this is 40 years later. And I'm telling you, they were hurting. They were really hurting because people would like, I'm not going over there anymore. And these are people who shopped in that area for 80 years. And they're
Right.
like, I'm not going anymore. It's ridiculous. You can't park your car. Parking is everything. And for what you were saying, I think the idea of, finding that parking and then getting that trolley sort of thing going where you can, get it in the parking lot, get in that little trolley, jump off when you want,
Boom.
hit the stores, hit the shops. And I'm not just saying that because you're a business owner, but that should always be at the heart of any plan to revitalize or rejuvenate something is the parking. People have to get there and they want to be comfortable leaving their car somewhere. And the parking in the trolley, I think, is always a good idea. And again, it kind of goes with that old style feel. You're in a town that's older. You have the brick facing, you have some cobblestone down there by the tracks,
Yeah.
and then you have this cool trolley. I mean, that's the way to go with it, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And then you take some folks down to the Riverwalk because a lot of them don't realize those are
Yeah,
beautiful Riverwalks.
it is
Take them
really
down there and
nice.
let that be a drop off spot. Because I kind of said, you can think like 4 drop that you pick people up and then take them to one of those locations. Obviously, the parking lot's going to have to be one of them, and I don't know that I'd count that as a drop off spot. That's a pickup and drop off.
Yeah,
But
that's the point of origination, right? Yeah.
yeah, so I think it would really do a lot to help folks because even the business owners like myself, when I park in the back alleyway, but in the evenings, I know that Crafty, they have people that start parking in the back to get in and they go into the back entrance. And I don't have a lot of heartburn over it other than when I've got stuff I've got to, take out or unload. It makes it really difficult for me to do that if somebody's parked there because they're having a couple beers at it's an immense improvement. But so anyway, Ken, if you're listening, or Mayor Bellamy, if you're listening, those are some ideas for how you can help to improve things down in the Conway area. And I think the same is true of Myrtle Beach as well with the mayor there. I don't know that anyone had run against. Oh my gosh, her name just went right out of my head.
Mayor Bethune, right?
Bethune, thank you, Bethune. Yeah, Mayor Bethune. Not sure that she's got anybody. I've heard whispers that she had, and I'm kind of shaking my head at this one. I heard that either A, she was considering running for senator if Tim Scott is gone or Lindsey Graham. She could never beat either of them if they're still in there. Or B, she was looking to run for governor. And I don't know what world she lives in where she thinks that she's done an adequate job with crime and everything else in Myrtle Beach that would propel her to either one of those positions. So again, another
Yeah,
example of she's a Democrat. So
and there's an example too of, you need to know what your product is and you need to know how to sell it. One
yes,
of the things I hear most frequently from people down here who are, at least natives, or certainly here a lot longer than I have been, is they bemoan the fact that they tore down the pavilion, that the roller coasters got, that all of that stuff is like gone, and
yeah,
all the character went with it.
yep,
So, and you don't want to lose that. Like I said, to get back to Conway, you don't want to lose that in Conway. But Myrtle Beach, I think, has to figure out what it is and how they want to sell it. Because right now, to me, they don't really have an identity. People
yep,
have a lot of different viewpoints about it. As you move around, especially as you move around in areas where you're trying to sell Myrtle Beach, and the reputation isn't great, unfortunately. And I
mm-mm,
think that a lot of that is self-inflicted. It's obviously the crime is always an issue. And then their idea to, oh, we'll save it by bringing in gambling is absolutely the wrong idea. That's not the way
detrimental.
you want
That's
to
not
go.
good.
It just brings in the wrong element, and then you have that reputation. All you have to do is look at Atlantic City. I mean, Atlantic City was a rough area, and they went in there with all the casinos, and now it's a rough area with a lot of casinos. Nothing
Yes.
really changed for the people that lived there. I mean, there was more jobs to a point, but a lot of that has changed. And of course, now there's gambling everywhere. So a place like Atlantic City takes a major hit because you don't have to go there to gamble. You can gamble anywhere. But
Well,
those are the ideas. Like Myrtle Beach, that's not the way you want to go if you're
no,
trying to
agreed.
rebrand the city.
Yeah, and I would even go one step further, having seen the movie Sound of Freedom, and you've seen that as well, right? Sound
Oh
of
yeah,
Freedom.
so the first day.
I got to tell you, folks, if you haven't seen that movie, please go see it. Is to me is that if we were to open up a casino, for example, Myrtle Beach is already a high traffic human trafficking zone, prostitution, and that's true of any vacation destination, truly, because people go there sometimes for the sole purpose of finding someone in the human trafficking field. So I can only imagine that if we added gambling, how much more that would exacerbate that problem. It would not alleviate it, folks. It would make it much, much worse. And I don't want to do anything that is going to further endanger the plight of kids, particularly I forget the number now. Was it 56 or 85,000 migrant children that have now been
Oh
lost
yeah,
in the
yeah,
United States?
87,000, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was an insane number of kids, and that's a lot of children that are completely destroyed. And so I asked someone, I said, how do you identify? What are some things that we can look for? They say, if you see a young person, even if they're 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, whatever, if they look like they're hooked on meth, most likely they were the victim of human trafficking. But what happens is when they're young, they're compliant force them to do whatever. And then as they get older and they become more physically capable of breaking away or running away, then they start to drug them, and they get them hooked on, heroin, whatever, to again make them compliant. And then once they get to a certain point where they're just addicted and they're not even for the trade anymore, they literally just throw them out of the car. That's why they become homeless on the sides of the road. And I thought, oh my God, they just dispose of
Yeah.
them like garbage. That's a problem, folks. And we as Americans really, since we are a nation that is, the number one contributor, participant, whatever you want to call it, in the human sex trade, we've got to do better. This is not acceptable. So I would hope that the mayor in Myrtle Beach, as well as the other small cities around Horry County, would say we want to step up and do our part to fight against this human trafficking. We were talking about it, Jeanette Spurlock and we had a meeting with the group of us, and we were discussing, how do you deal with this? And she made the point that she's been doing a little bit of research on it, and they call it sponsors. When you want to go like that, you want to be a foster parent, there's a process you go through to be able to be permitted to foster a child. Well, all of these illegal kids that are coming across the border, they're going to what they call sponsors. Now, here's the issue I have with that, John. If you know anything about the foster care system, it's really hard to get enough people because there's so many kids that need to be fostered, that need foster care, and yet you can't get anybody to step up and say, okay, I'll take a child, I'll take one into my home. So you're telling me that we in South Carolina can't even get enough people to foster kids, but now we have enough people willing to foster thousands of illegal immigrant children?
Yeah, and
Because
more
that's really
often
what
than
it is.
yeah, and that's one of the. I mean, that was one of the tragedies about them suspending the DNA testing. Is that then you just send them to people that say, "Oh yeah, it's a relative of mine," and they go to people that they don't even know, and they keep their mouths shut, and then off you go into human trafficking. And
Exactly.
it's we could do a million shows about that. But you know what,
Yeah.
Myrtle Beach has to decide what it is. You
Yes.
can't. They've been selling it as a family friendly place for a very 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 long time. So between the families and the golf, um, just doesn't seem to be enough because what you're also seeing is the crime issue, the human trafficking issue, and then you want to sell this as a family place, and then you're going to add gambling. Yeah, I know
Yeah.
Vegas tried to do that and say, hey, there's great things for kids and everything, and yeah, families go on vacation there, but more often than not, it's not families. So I don't think
Now
that
you
those are
can't
things
have
that
your
are
motto be
compatible.
what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas and then claim it's family
That's right.
friendly.
But you probably remember that back, I guess it was in the early 2000s. They were like, "Hey, Vegas is family friendly. Hey, this is where to
Yes.
go. Stuff for kids and stuff," and it didn't work out. So
Yeah.
you can't have those different selling points.
Yeah. It's a
they're
dichotomy.
opposites.
You can't tell. Yeah.
You're going family, golf, and gambling. It just doesn't work. And
Yeah.
we've spoken about on this show many times. We've been proponents of building a sports arena rather than going the gambling route. Get a 9,000 seat auditorium, become a major stop on all the major concert tours, college basketball, UFC, MMA, trade shows. I mean, you could probably get 150, 180 dates in there easy because what
Mhm.
people look for, and I know a lot about this from doing the college basketball all those years, what they look for, who's ever going to run their event, is they look for stuff that's already in place, like hotels and restaurants.
Yeah.
So when you
Hotels,
come in
restaurants.
with
Yeah.
thousands of people, you want to make sure that that particular area can handle it. Myrtle Beach can handle it, and
Yep.
they won't need a lot. They won't need to change a lot, and it'll change things in general because you'll have a lot of people coming in, and then things will perk up. For my money, that's the best investment. Is
Yep.
if you can bring in. I mean, think about this. You get to college basketball time, you get the women's regional NCAA, and you have South Carolina as the number one seed, and they're playing their first two games at the Myrtle Beach Arena. Guess
Yep.
what? That's sellout. Both games sold out, 9,000, no problem. And you're probably going to sell out the whole thing. That's a lot
Yep.
of people, and it's a lot of jobs, and it's a lot of money. The one thing I would stay away from is ice. As much as I love hockey, I played hockey. on a very low level. But I mean, I played everything. But ice is when it gets super expensive to maintain, not just because it's warm down here. It's just
Right.
a lot of work. But and
Yeah.
it's whenever you're transforming the arena into what you need it to be, where it's going from, say, basketball to a trade show, the ice is always the issue. And guess what? The ground is always freezing. You sit
Yeah.
there, your feet are cold all the time. But I would
Yeah.
I would love to see, yeah, I would love to see them do something like that. If you had a sports complex, new ballpark, new arena right next to each other, I think that would be much better for the area than bringing in gambling.
No, I agree with you 100%. And we both agree. And we do obviously have some major concerts that we hold here. They do the country music, um,
Right.
what do they call that, weekend, whatever. And that's, I mean, that's outside. And so obviously if the weather's great, it's a fantastic thing. But if the weather's craptastic, then
It's
it's a little
washout, right?
tougher. Had several people say, "Oh yeah, I loved it. I've already got my tickets for next year." And I thought, I ain't standing outside in the heat to watch anybody. I don't care how big a deal. I ain't doing it. Um, that's just my
Yeah.
preference. But a lot of the younger people and some of the older people don't mind doing it. But that's not for me. But I think if we could have something like that where you have position seated location, just like you said, that's gonna be booked constantly. And then it becomes, because right now, if there is a concert, typically you're looking at going to Charlotte, North Carolina. That's where they have a lot of, because they got, some bigger places in
Yeah, that's the
Charlotte.
big places, right?
So Charlotte, Atlanta, why can't Myrtle Beach become one of those locations where we have the big name draws that we get them in here? I think that
Yeah,
would be
even I
great.
mean, I understand you're like halfway between Wilmington and Charleston, but this is still a place, as we talked about endlessly, that's booming, and
Yep.
population is growing all the time, and people move here from all over the place, and a lot of those people are used to having access to top musical acts. They just are. And I
Yeah.
think that you become a regular stop on every major tour. Once you get the 9,000 is like the cutoff, because you get 9,000
Yeah.
seats and then 500 on the floor. So you get 9,500 seats. That's usually the cutoff where a lot of the big acts will play. And you'll get some major acts through here. And like I said, sporting events, you can, if you build it, close to the convention center, you can pretty much make that all one facility. You can have big trade shows. It wouldn't quite be big enough for a political convention. They usually like the 20,000 seat arena for that, but you could
Yeah.
still have some really big conventions here. And then your
Yeah.
hotels are busy. And then guess what? Provides a tremendous amount of jobs. And look, that's what people want.
Yeah. You know, speaking of Myrtle Beach, I'd be remiss if I didn't at least cover this. This week we had our banner planes went down in the water. Thankfully, the pilot was not killed. He was injured mildly, but so we have exciting things happening here. And I think it was a friend of mine, Jay, had noticed or commented that in the time that he's been here in the last 5 or 6 years, something of that nature, that there are 4 to 5 of these that have occurred. We might need to do a little checking on our aviation flying and stuff. Because
Yeah,
when
and
I
you never
lived in
know.
Hawaii, the choppers were constantly going down because they weren't doing
Right.
proper maintenance on those. So,
Yeah, you
um,
never know what's going to happen. I mean, they might even have to shoot down a balloon over the beach. You never know.
it's right.
Come to Myrtle Beach, shoot down
It's
spy
over
balloons.
there. So it's been an interesting year. So I look forward to
Yeah,
seeing
that
what
is
the
one
future
weird way
holds.
to get into the news. Yeah, that's a
It
bizarre way
is.
to get into
It
the
is.
news. Is that, especially because if you think about that whole thing, I mean, that balloon left China, right? And it ends up in Myrtle Beach. I mean, you got to think about. I mean, it went
Yeah.
all, and now they were programming that. They knew exactly where they were going.
Sure.
But
They were driving it. Yeah.
how do we get to take it out of the air? There's if they
Yeah,
put
you'd
out the
almost think they would have had that go across down to Florida, where there's a lot more bases.
well,
But
they
I
hit
don't
all the
know.
bases they wanted to hit, and then I guess they figured, well, we better shoot it down because people in Myrtle Beach are going to shoot it down themselves, so we might as well take it
That's
out.
right. That's all the rednecks out there shouting. I'm gonna get it. I got it, Bubba. Hey, I'm with him. I'm right there with him when there's rednecks at him, and they're trying to shoot it down too. Um, so Myrtle Beach has not lacked for newsworthy stories of late. That is
No,
certain. They're going to be trying the young lady who tragically crashed into the golf cart with the newlywed couple, and killed the bride. She is being brought up on charges, I believe, today. In fact, also today, in about 10 minutes, the governor will be signing into law the fentanyl bill. It's kind of already been done, but they're now having it for the media.
Almost signing
And
it.
so I'm really excited about that. I would like to attend it, but I've got to get to the store myself, so couldn't make it today. But I'm really excited to see that bill is finally um, a lot of pain, sweat, tears, losing their children. Again, I lost my cousin to the poison, so happy to see that's happening. So there are some positive things happening across the state. Um, and we definitely want to make sure that folks are aware. Now, John, I don't know if you received anything from your state house representative, but I did get a mailer this weekend from Representative Carla Schusler, alleging something to the fact of Carla delivered, and then highlighting all the things it alleges she delivered on, like the Second Amendment and pro-life and et cetera, et cetera. Um, I don't think that's an accurate representation of her service. All of that together, and we'll compare notes. We'll compare her votes with what she claims, because I'm pretty sure it's not the case. But the thing of it is, you get these mailers out there, and I hate to say it, for the low information voters, they see that and they go, "Oh, well, look, she did stuff." Um, and then I also were on Saturday, I want to think it was. No, it might have been Sunday. Anyway, and it was a young lady who was doing door hangers for DeSantis. And so, I told her, so, well, I'm actually supporting him. And she had the list. And sad, folks, I got to tell you, in my neighborhood here, because when I ran for county council, I got the list of who voted. And John, there's probably about 700 homes in here. And at that time, there's probably about 600, 650, and 44 families actually voted at all. And I'm sad to say that my neighbors were not a part of that. I was very disappointed. So because I did vote, that's obviously one of the reasons why they stopped by at my door. And I just thought, we've got to do better. Folks, we got to do better. You can't claim to be politically involved and then you don't vote in the primaries. And in South Carolina, unlike a lot of other states, the primaries are absolutely critical. John and I are beating this horse to death. It's the open primary, but you better vote. You have to vote if you want to get the right candidate in there. If not, you're really letting the Democrats decide which Republican is going to run. And in many cases, it ends up not being really a Democrat who says, well, I can't win if I run as a Democrat, so I'm going to run as a Republican. So again, I just, she was knocking on doors, and I said, the folks right to the right of me are solid Republicans. And she looks down and she goes, well, they're not on the list. And I was like, well, I know it's going to vote in the last primary. It's not. It's just that's no bueno. So please,
No,
and I had some folks
yeah,
when I went back and knocked on every door, John. By the way, I knocked on all 44 doors. I don't know who they voted for, if they voted for me or not, but I thank them
for
for
voting.
voting, because it was important. And I had some people get all upset. How did you know I voted? And I said, well, it's public knowledge. It's not something that can be information. And I said, I don't know who you voted for. I just know that you voted, and I just wanted to say thank you for voting. So.
Yeah, and what's amazing, I think, is that a lot of people come down here, people relocating down here for a better life, and they're running from a government that they could no longer stand. Left-wing policies have driven them out of wherever they were. And yet when they get here, they don't get engaged to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And, I live in a subdivision, and I forget how many townhouses. I forget how many there are, 160 maybe. And we talk politics all the time. And the people that have relocated here are conservatives. I mean, probably 8 out of 10. They came down here because they want to deal with that nonsense anymore. Yet far too many of them don't vote.
Yeah.
And, they can't make it any easier when you go down to change your driver's license. They say, hey, you want to register to vote? Yes. Because I want to make sure that what happened in my previous hometown doesn't happen again.
Here.
So yeah, people need to get out and do that. And I think that's another reason why when people realize that there's open primaries, they're just flabbergasted. People are just like, I tell them that, it shows you how disconnected they are, that they don't know. And I'll be honest with you, when I came down here, I didn't know either. And they're like, what do you mean open primary? What's the sense of having an open primary? That's exactly my question.
Yeah.
But then they're even more dissuaded from getting involved because they're like, well, that's stupid because the Democrats vote in the Republican primary, and then you have to hold your nose, vote in the Republican and for the general that you don't want to vote for.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that
That's how I keep getting
a
Lindsey
big part of
Graham.
it. Right. Exactly right. And then I think that, if you register with a party when you get here, I think you're more likely to get involved than not.
Yeah. I know the lieutenant governor told if we had closed primaries that the uber conservative Republicans who ran in places like Florence and Darlington would never get any support from the Democrats. And so we would lose the Republican seats. And I thought to Democrats. And I thought, well, we already are losing the seats to Democrats, Republicans. So that's not like
Right.
that's a new thing. And if you believe that having a supermajority is somehow really important in South Carolina, I'm going to say BS because we have a supermajority and yet we can't get things passed in the way that we should. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, John. I don't think
No.
it
And
did
what are we
because
what are we rated as far as conservative states? What are we rated?
exactly. Yeah,
30,
come on.
31?
Yeah, we're
I mean,
it's not
right. So
good.
we have a
It's
super
not
majority, but it
good.
doesn't do you any good if you just work in, with the mini swamp, right? Which is pretty much what it is.
Yeah, we have a super majority, but it's in the Republican Party, really Democrats.
They
So I
don't
would
they
rather just know them by their real names rather than have them pretend to be something that they are not. So I just disagree. Yeah, it may mean that we don't get a quote unquote a Republican elected in Darlington or Florence. Just let people be what they really are. Carla Schuster is a Democrat. She worked on Hillary Clinton's campaign as a volunteer. She was a member of the Horry County Democratic Women's Club since 2010. So I just Democrat Carla don't and the person who recruited her to run was Heather Crawford. So what does that say about Heather other than she's a huge swamp creature who's all about the Myrtle Beach Chamber of Commerce and the money that they swindle and misappropriate and we don't even know where the money goes because we um, have that audited because they're a private institute. So let's stop giving public dollars to private companies unless it comes with a stipulation that they may be audited. Without that, then that has to be the caveat, and if it cannot be, then we cannot give you the money. We'll do something else with it. I don't like that. I don't like giving. Again, it goes back to what you said, and you said it 1,000 times, and it's right every time. Is that the government should not be the one that pays they don't pick winners and losers.
No.
So I don't think that's the way it should run in Horry County either. But we've got about a little more than 15 minutes left to go. So I know again, this is a Palmetto politics, largely about what happens in South Carolina, but there is no way that we cannot talk about what's going on at the national level with the latest revelations. Because I know for as long as I can remember, for at least the time since he, hid in his basement, about it, President Biden has said repeatedly, I never discussed business with my son or any members of my family. Now, we had a gentleman yesterday who came forward to testify, and he said, I believe that, how many was it, 20 times?
over 20 times,
That,
yeah.
oh, yeah, over 20 put on the phone on the speaker call while they were having business meetings. Now, it may be true that he didn't specifically talk about business with them. Maybe he talked about the weather. I don't know. But he can't say he didn't talk to anything. He didn't do anything. That's just completely. So what are your thoughts
Yeah.
about what happened yesterday, John?
Well, yeah, that was Hunter's old business partner and college buddy, Devin Archer, who testified,
Yep.
who I remember hearing about, oh my gosh, a couple of years ago. I mean, if you watch the Tucker Carlson interview a couple of years ago with Tony Bobolinsky, which was actually before the election, Devin
Yep.
Archer's name was mentioned prominently. So we knew all about that, you're going on 3 years now, and now it's coming out. The two things that I have to say about what's going on in Washington. One, McCarthy needs to call everybody back. Call everybody back and have an emergency session, and let's get this thing going. All right, let's get this impeachment going, or either that or they're not serious about it. The other thing that will tell me that they're serious about it is they need to ask first and then subpoena President Obama. Then I'll know they're serious about it. Because when all of this was going on, Joe Biden was vice president for Barack Obama. And he apparently looks like he was selling access and dictating foreign policy based on the money that was coming in.
Yeah.
Now, that would be obviously wildly embarrassing to President Obama, but at this point, I really don't care. All right. And I think it's very possible that if you did that, the former president could throw the former vice president and current president under the bus.
And he would.
I mean, he and that would be
like
the
that.
end. Right, like that. I mean, it might make President Obama look bad in the beginning, but he can also say, look, I made this guy is the most experienced foreign policy person in Washington. He had 40 years experience. You know, he was my vice president, and that was the reason, because he had experience. And how was I supposed to know that he's over there cutting deals and taking money? I mean, he could do that, but I really won't. I really won't believe they're serious about all of this unless and until they talk to then Vice President Biden's boss.
Yeah.
Right. What did he know and when did he know it?
Yeah, exactly. The idea that Hunter and Joe were flying to these foreign countries constantly, and that those countries then dollars to Hunter, and then you got I don't know if it's I think it's an email where Hunter is talking to his daughters or kids or whatever, saying that, you know, I hope you're able to make the kind of money that I have, and you know, I would never ask you to give me part of it like Dad has.
Right.
I'm like, okay, there you go, full stop right there. That he has been giving money to his dad. Now, my Democratic friends have said, yes, Shannon, but there's no proof, there's no trail, there's no evidence that he gave money to his dad. So, you know, are you kidding me? So Joe is a multimillionaire in the Senate and then as vice president and now president. Those jobs don't make you millionaires by themselves. It's the influence that you sell.
Now,
and I don't know, has Joe written a book even? If he's written a book that he didn't plagiarize, I should say.
Well, he can't write a book.
You got, I mean, I'm sorry, folks. You've had multiple art critics come forward and say none of the paintings that Hunter Biden has sold for $500,000 or hundreds of thousands of dollars are worth their weight in salt. They've said, look, at most you're talking about $25,000, $30,000. And again, the only reason they would even bring that price is because of not because of the value. And it's pretty fair to say that in 100 years, those paintings will be freaking worthless. Nobody's going to care because he's like, who is this guy? He's not enough. Right. Yeah, they're worthless now, right? But you got people paying millions of dollars for, you know, for multiple paintings. So I'm sorry, that is just, you might as well just have a car wash business that's coin operated so you can launder your money.
Yeah, and one of the other things too, I think that really got underreported by all of the media was that, and you'll appreciate this because you're a small business owner. If you ever try to go get a business loan and you have strange activity reports, 2 or 3, you're not getting a loan. You're not getting a loan. You're just not. You're nope. For whatever reason, the bank doesn't want to do business with you. It has come out in all of these documents that have been secured by the House that the Bidens have over 170 strange activity reports from the banking industry. Yep. Over 170. Now, like I said, if we're going to buy a house or you're going to secure a loan for a business and you have 3 strange activity reports, guess what? Find another bank. You're not getting anything. Over 170, and the banking industry did nothing. Nothing,
right.
Which shows you exactly how deep all of this is. How do you not follow up on 170 strange activity reports in the banking industry? And that's
like, folks, that's like having your house, your car smoking, there's smoke billowing out of it, and the fire department says, well, there's no fire.
Yeah.
Reporting that there's smoke, but there's no fire. Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And I think the place we're in right now is a place that the framers could have never thought we'd be. Because here we are. I mean, the impeachment process was well thought out. But it was based on the fact that the government was going to be made up of honorable people.
Mm-hmm.
So honorable people, meaning that look, Democrats, Republicans, it didn't matter that the rule of law had to be followed. Well, we're not at that point anymore because we're at a position where impeachment right now, for me, isn't enough.
Right.
If you look at the evidence that's out there that has come forward, any prosecutor could indict multiple people in the Biden family right now. Even if you just started with tax evasion, which is how they got Al Capone, right? Even if you just started with that, right? And the money laundering and the IRS and things of that nature, even if you just started with that, you could criminally indict the president. Now, the framers didn't want that. They didn't want you to be able to criminally indict the president because then it looks political. And where are we? We're in a position where the Department of Justice, quote unquote justice, which is obviously supposed to be impartial, the law shall be
Like
like
the
death,
Department
which
of
spares
Injustice.
no one. They're in on it. They're not
Yeah.
doing anything. They're not investigating. Instead, they're investigating,
Covering up.
wasting tens of millions of dollars investigating the sitting president's opponent, which is what they do in third world countries. If what was going on in this country was going on in fill in the blank, any country, Africa, South America, Central America, the United States would be interrupting in that election, saying, wait, you can't do that. You can't lock up your opponent. You can't do that. It's undemocratic. And that's what they're doing. But who's going to do it here? Nobody. So we're in a position where the government is not made up of honorable people. So I don't know what the next step is. If the Department of Justice isn't going to do their job, well, who do we bring in to indict people who are breaking the law? There is nobody. So are we just going to let this go, on and on and on? Or are we going to do something? Well, like I said, I think McCarthy needs to bring the House back right away and go full tilt on this impeachment. Personally, I just think that, today's August 1st. My gut tells me that I don't think Joe Biden's going to be around. I told you this by September 15th. I think he'll be out. I really do, because this is going south faster than they ever could have thought. They didn't think that there was going to be this much investigation. And quite honestly, it's too easy. The stuff that they're finding out, and amateur, if you were setting up shadow companies and offshore banks and everything, from everything I've read, they didn't do a very good job of that either. They should have got some people who are a little bit dirtier than they are to set that up, because they're a little bit better at it.
Or they should have just moved to the Bahamas, because we don't have any kind of, relationship with the Bahamas to bring a criminal back.
Apparently, there's been word that there are quite a few offshore accounts that are out there that they're
the
trying
guy,
to get
complete
their hands
ass, crazy-haired man. He's charges have been dropped. We'll never find out all the folks that got money illicitly.
That's a whole other. That's a whole other. And again, Department of Justice not applying the law evenly. Right. I used to tell my students all the time, Montesquieu said that the law shall be like death, which spares no one. It's not what's going on right now. They're picking and choosing. The law can't be arbitrary. If the law is arbitrary, it doesn't work.
That's exactly right. And that's exactly what we're seeing. It's not working because it is not, they're not fair. They are definitely picking and choosing who they're going to chase. Now, I think, and I'm sure you agree, that there'll be no issue with getting the impeachment in the House. In the House. But we all know that once it gets to the Senate, the trial version, it's not going anywhere, because the Democrats kind of rule that. And you got to have 2/3. We'll never get 2/3.
Well, and then you don't. That shows you that you don't have honorable people. If you lay out that evidence,
Exactly right.
And that evidence is, it borders, like I said, if the information keeps coming and it plays out that there was access sold, you look it up. That's treason. That's what that is. And if you're going to look at all of that evidence and say, oh, well, you know what? He's a Democrat. I can't vote to remove him. Then you know what our government's done. And with everything that we just said, how are we going to get people to vote?
Yeah, that's. They're literally
broken. It's broken, and that's why people don't vote. Yeah, that's why people don't vote.
I don't know how we get past this. I really don't, because and I do agree with you. I do believe he should be impeached. There's no question in my mind. The evidence is there. He should be impeached, and he should be found, guilty if the evidence is what we believe it to be. But the fact that you and I know that's not going to happen, because the Senate is really frustrating. And it does exactly what you said. It leads people to say, what the hell's the point? Why go vote? Because my vote's not going to matter anyway. The Democrats are going to do what they want to do. They've largely, taken over all of the major agencies. The march through the big organizations has happened, and they sat back and let it happen. I don't really see a way to fix it, because even within the Republican Party, we have so many weak, they're not conservatives. I mean, they're not even moderates. I mean, they're liberals. It's just, there are no conservative Democrats left. There are none. That's not a thing. I
Yeah,
might
they've all
grant
gone
you there's
independent. Yeah.
moderates. There might be a moderate, but there are no conservatives. Most of them are really super liberal, and most of them are socialists. To be totally honest, they're actually socialist. And at least Bernie, I'll credit Bernie. He's at least doesn't hide it. He's very honest, and even AOC, for her lack of anything, she pretty much says she's a democratic socialist. So, again, you got to give them some, no, I don't know, no respect, but some measure of, okay, I give you credit for at least saying that, the truth.
Right. It is what it
But
is.
for all
Right.
these other folks, for all the other folks that are still pretending that there's somehow any semblance of honor in their service, it's pathetic. So
Yeah. And the other
we
part of this
have
too
to
is
vote.
that,
We have to vote.
yeah, the Democrats completely bastardized the impeachment process.
Yes.
Because up until this point, the only time you had impeachment was Andrew Johnson, which we know that was a setup. I mean, that was, we know that whole story. We don't have to teach that one. And then you had Nixon, which they never really got to. They just started the inquiry, and then he
Right,
resigned.
because
And
that's what I was going to say a minute ago. He was so mortified at the thought of actually being impeached that he said, "You
right.
know what? I'm going to step down."
And he didn't want to drag the country through it.
And bingo. And
Right.
Biden would
And
never
even
do
with the
that.
Clinton, yeah, even with the Clinton impeachment, it was as political as it was. You can't deny the fact that President Clinton broke the law. He did. He obstructed justice. He suborned perjury. Okay, now it was in a trial that was unrelated to the governing of the country, but he was still an officer of the court because he was a lawyer, and he lied in court under oath. So what was the recourse there? So they voted to, many people voted to remove him, and other people felt, well, look, he broke the law, but it wasn't high crimes and misdemeanors. Did it mess up his ability to govern the country? And a lot of people said, no, it wasn't a private matter. That's not a private matter. When you lie in court, it's no longer a private matter. Sorry,
Right.
you lied about a private matter, but you lied in court about. So something has to be done about that. And worst case scenario is he should have been disbarred permanently. He only got disbarred for like 10 years. Okay. But then when you look at what they did with President Trump, that whole thing was just created out of whole cloth. We now know that.
Yes.
The whole thing was a scam. And then the second one was more of a scam than the first one.
Oh
So
my
now
God.
people are
Absolutely.
like, they're tired of impeachment. They went through it twice. They're like, oh, impeachment. They're not going to do anything anyway. And guess what? That's because the Democrats made sure that they bastardized the process first, so they could, they could defend a guy like Biden or whoever else was going to come, because it looks like they're all double dipping there.
Yeah, and my feeling on is, while we're talking about the Trump impeachment, I always feel like they're double dipping. It's like double jeopardy. They already impeached him, which is, folks, it's just an indictment of an elected official for January 6th, found him not guilty. So now they're bringing another indictment forward for January 6th. I
Oh,
mean,
of course, they're going to keep doing it.
is that not
Yeah, they
double
just want to tie
jeopardy?
him
How
up.
is that not double jeopardy?
Yeah, they just want to tie him up. But I think the fact that we are impeachment weary, impeachment. When I was teaching, I started teaching back in the 90s, and it was right when the Clinton impeachment took place. And there was a great show on CNN. Can you imagine there was actually great shows on CNN at one time?
Yeah, there was. When it started.
Jeff Greenfeld was on, and he was the host. He had some really good shows, and he had a professor, a law professor from Quinnipiac University up in Connecticut, who was talking about impeachment, and he described it this way. He said, impeachment is the big red button that the framers put on the wall that was like, don't touch that unless it's absolutely necessary. And everybody always looks at him and go, yeah, right. And he's like, okay, every 100 years or so, somebody's going to say, "Ooh, let's push it and see what happens." Okay, we get that. Mm-hmm. So you hadn't had it. You had Andrew Johnson in the 1860s, and then you had Nixon with that attempt, and then you had Clinton, and then you do it twice to a guy like back to back, and as we said, it's all made out of whole cloth. Well, they pushed that button back to back, and now nobody wants to go for a third time. So
Yep.
what do? Well, I don't know what position we're in, unless, of course, information comes out that's going to make Biden either A, resign, or B, they figure it out and say they have the 25th Amendment him, right? And then
Yeah.
C, they'll try to get rid of Vice President Harris so they can put their own people in there. Maybe we'll find out who actually had the cocaine in the White House. They'll probably try to pin it on Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
We've done everything else.
Wouldn't that be funny?
It's all like a movie script.
Yeah, so that does bring us to the end of the show. We could certainly continue to talk about this. If you're not paying attention, you don't know what's going on, you can tune in here and we'll try to keep you abreast of everything that's happening. But I understand it's sort of taxing sometimes to watch all the news that's happening because my blood pressure goes
Ugh.
up here. I've actually got a sleep stage 1 hypertension, so I got to get that down. So one of the things I've started doing in the evening is I don't watch any news. I watch something like I'm watching reruns of Frasier right now because it's lighthearted, funny. But anyway, still important. You got to pay attention. You got to know what's happening. But that is going to do it for today. We thank you. God bless. Godspeed, and folks, we will see you next time.